Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Kuzra School. Chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? When they arrived, the king and queen of hearts were sitting on their throne. Around them was a great crowd, different little birds and creatures, as well as a whole pack of carts. The knave was standing before them. He was in chains, and on each his side there was a soldier, and near the king was a white rabbit. In the very middle of the court was a table with a large dish of tarts on it. They looked so delicious that Alice felt quite hungry looking at them. I hope the trial will be finished soon, she thought, and everybody can have the refreshments. But it seemed impossible, so she began looking at everything about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was glad that she knew the name of nearly everything there. That's the judge, she said to herself, because he is wearing a great wig. The judge, by the way, was the king, and his crown was put on over the wig. And that's the jury box, thought Alice, and those 12 creatures, she called them creatures because some of them were animals and some were birds. I suppose they are the jurors. She felt very proud of her knowledge. The 12 jurors were busy writing something. What are they doing? Alice whispered to the griffin. They are writing down their names, the griffin whispered in reply, because they are afraid of forgetting them before the end of the trial. Stupid things, Alice began in a loud voice, but she stopped immediately because the white rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" and the king put on his spectacles and looked around. "Herald, read the accusation," said the king. And the white rabbit began to read. The queen of hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer day. The knave of hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away. "Give your verdict," the king said to the jury. Not yet, the rabbit hastily interrupted. "Call the first witness," said the king, and the white rabbit called out, "First witness." The first witness was a hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "I beg pardon, your majesty," he began, "for bringing these things here, but I haven't finished my tea yet." "It's not good," said the king. "When did you begin?" The hatter looked at the March Hare, who was in the court too with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was, he said. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, added the Dormouse. "Write that down," the king said to the jury, and the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates. "Take off your hat," the king said to the hatter. "It isn't mine," said the hatter. "I sell them," the hatter added as an explanation. "I have no hats of my own. I am a hatter." Here the queen put on her spectacles and began staring at the hatter, who became pale. "Give your evidence," said the king, "and don't be nervous or you'll be executed right now." These words frightened the witness even more, so that he beat a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment, Alice had a very curious feeling, which puzzled her greatly, until she understood what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and at first she wanted to get up and leave the court, but then she decided to stay where she was. "Give your evidence," the king repeated angrily, "or you'll be executed, whether you're nervous or not." "I'm a poor man, your majesty," the hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't begun my tea about a week or so ago." "If that's all you know about it, you may sit down," the king said. "I'd rather finish my tea," said the hatter, with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. "You may go," said the king, and the hatter hurriedly left the court. "And just take his hat off outside," the queen added to one of the officers, but the hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. "Call the next witness," said the king. The next witness was the duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and the people near the door began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence," said the king. "I can't," said the cook. The king looked anxiously at the white rabbit, who said in a low voice, "Your majesty must cross-examine this witness." "Well," the king said in a deep voice, "what are tarts made of?" "Pepper, mostly," said the cook. "Treacle," said that sleepy voice behind her. "Behead that dormouse! Turn that dormouse out of court! Off with his whiskers!" the queen screamed. For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, and the cook disappeared. "Never mind," said the king with great relief. "Call the next witness." And he added to the queen, "Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. I have a headache." Alice watched the white rabbit as he looked into the list, feeling very curious to see the next witness. "They haven't got much evidence yet," she said to herself. Imagine her surprise when the white rabbit read out very loudly the name Alice. This is the end of chapter 11. Thank you for listening and subscribe to Kuzra School.